Good evening, I'm Bill Moyers. There's something so clean, so compelling, so definite about the coming year 2000 that everyone, it seems, is indulging in a little millennial enthusiasm. But consider this, that same year in the Byzantine calendar will be called 7507, and in the Jewish calendar, 5759. The Chinese will be marking the year 4698, and it will be the year 1418 in the Mohammedan calendar. Those calculations come from a man who is famous for thinking globally and rationally. Tonight he tells us why we all must follow suit if we want to survive, and why we can't wait for the year 2000 AD to start. Join me for a conversation with Isaac Asimov.
This program is made possible by a grant from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. A World of Ideas with Bill Moyers.
Isaac Asimov. Whatever you've probably read something of his. Science fiction, of course. His Foundation series is a classic. Science fact, chemistry, astronomy, physics, biology, children's books, history, math. One scientist calls him the greatest explainer of the age. The American Humanist Association has named Dr. Asimov the Humanist of the Year, and some religious folk have considered him the incarnation of the devil. In the Great Hall of Cooper Union in New York City, where Americans have been debating ideas since the days of Abraham Lincoln, I asked Dr. Asimov about his faith in the power of human reason. Are you an enemy of religion?
No, I'm not. I feel that, as seems to me any civilized, humane person should feel, is that every person has a right to his own beliefs and his own securities and his own likings. What I'm against is attempting to place a person's belief system onto the nation or the world generally. We object because we say constantly that the Soviet Union is trying to dominate the world, communize the world. Well, the United States, I hope, is trying to democratize the world. But I certainly would be very much against trying to Christianize the world, or to Islamize it, or to Judaize it, or anything of the sort. And my objection to fundamentalism is not that they are fundamentalists, but that essentially they want me to be a fundamentalist too. Now, I can imagine they object. They say, I believe that evolution is true, and I want everyone to believe that evolution is true. But I don't want everyone to believe that evolution is true. I want them to study what we say about evolution, decide for themselves. Now, they say they want to teach creationism on an equal basis, but they can't. It's not a science. You can teach creationism in the churches, in the courses on religion. I mean, they would be horrified if I were to suggest that in the churches they teach secular humanism as an alternate way of looking at the universe, so they teach evolution as an alternate way of considering how life may have started. In the church, they teach only what they believe, and rightly so, I suppose. But on the other hand, in schools, in science courses, we've got to teach what scientists think is the way the universe works.
But of course, this is what frightens many believers. They see science as uncertain, always tentative, always subject to revisionism. They see science as a complex and chilling and enormous universe ruled by chance and impersonal laws. They see science as dangerous.
That is really the glory of science, that science is tentative, that it is not certain, that it is subject to change. What is really, in my way of thinking, disgraceful is to have a set of beliefs that you think is absolute and has been so from the start and can't change, where you simply won't listen to evidence. You say, if the evidence agrees with me, it's not necessary. If it doesn't agree with me, it's false. This is the legendary remark of Omar when they captured Alexandria and asked what to do with the library. He said, if the books agree with the Koran, they are not necessary and may be burned. If they disagree with the Koran, they are pernicious and must be burned. Well, there are still these Omar-like thinkers who think that all of knowledge will fit into one book called the Bible and refuse to allow that there is even the conceivability of an error there. That, to my way of thinking, is much more dangerous than a system of knowledge which is tentative and uncertain.
Do you see any room for reconciling the two worldviews, the religious view, the biblical view of the universe as God's drama, constantly interrupted and rewritten by divine intervention, and the view of the universe as scientists hold it, always having to be subjected to the test of observation and experimentation? Is there any room for reconciling?
Well, there is, if people are reasonable about this. There are many scientists who are honestly religious. You can rattle off the names of them. Millikan was a truly religious man. Morley of the Michelson-Morley experiment was truly religious. There were hundreds of others who did great scientific work, good scientific work, and at the same time were religious. But they did not mix their religion and science. In other words, they did not presume that if something they didn't understand took place in science, they could dismiss it by saying, well, that's what God wants. Or, at this point, a miracle took place. No. They know that science is strictly a construct of the human mind working according to the laws of nature, and that religion is something that lies outside and may embrace science. Well, on the other hand, if there were suddenly to arise evidence, scientific confirmable evidence, that God exists, then we'd have no choice. Scientists would have no choice but to accept that fact. On the other hand, the fundamentalists don't admit the possibility of evidence, let us say, that would show that evolution exists. Because any evidence you present, they will deny if it conflicts with the Word of God as they think it to be. So that the chances of compromise are only on one side. And therefore, I doubt that it will take place.
If God is dead, everything is permitted. That's what scares them.
Well, on the contrary, that assumes that human beings have no feeling about what is right and wrong. Is the only reason you are virtuous because that's your ticket to heaven? Is the only reason you don't beat your children to death because you don't want to go to hell? It seems to me that it's insulting to human beings to imply that only a system of rewards and punishments can keep you a decent human being. Isn't it conceivable a person wants to be a decent human being because that way he feels better, because that way the world is better? I would like to think, I don't believe that I'm ever going to heaven or hell. I think that when I die, there will be nothingness. That's what I firmly believe. That does not mean that I have the impulse to go out and rob and steal and rape and everything else because I don't fear punishment. For one thing, I fear worldly punishment. And for a second thing, I fear the punishment of my own conscience. I have a conscience. It doesn't depend on religion. And I think it's so with other people too. Besides, even in societies in which religion is very powerful, there's no shortage of crime and sin and misery and terrible things happening despite heaven and hell. I mean, I imagine if you go down death row, a bunch of murderers maybe who are waiting for execution, and ask them if they believe in God. They'll tell you yes.
Is there a morality in science?
Oh, absolutely. There is a morality in science that is further advanced than anywhere else. If you can find a person in science, and it happens, scientists are only human, who has faked his results, who has lied as far as his findings are concerned, who has tried to steal the work of another, who has done something scientists consider unethical. His scientific reputation is ruined. His scientific life is over. There is no forgiveness.
Because the morality is?
The morality is you report the truth, and you do your best to disprove your own findings. And you do not utilize someone else's findings and report them as your own. In any other branch of human endeavor, in politics, in economics, in law, in almost anything, people can commit crimes and still be heroes somehow. To my way of thinking, for instance, Colonel North has done terrible things, yet he's a hero and a patriot to some people. And this goes in almost every field. Only science is accepted. You make a misstep in science and you're through, really through.
You love the field, don't you? You love science.
Oh, I'm very fond of it. I think that it's amazing how many saints there have been among scientists. I'll give you an example. In 1900, De Vries studied mutations. He found a patch of evening primrose of different types, and he studied how they inherited their characteristics. And he worked out the laws of genetics. Two other guys worked out the laws of genetics at the same time. A guy called Charles Carens, who was a German, De Vries was a Dutchman, and Erich von Schermach, who was an Austrian. All three worked out the laws of genetics in 1900. All three looked through the literature, having done so, just to see what had been done before. All three discovered that in 1867, Gregor Mendel had worked out the laws of genetics, and people hadn't paid any attention then. All three reported their findings as confirmation of what Mendel had found. Not one of the three attempted to say that it was original with him once he discovered Mendel. And that's the sort of thing you just don't find outside of science.
Reporting to the truth.
And you know what it meant? It meant that two of them, Carens and Schermach, lived in obscurity. And De Vries is known because he also was the first to work out the theory of mutations. But as far as discovering genetics is concerned, Mendel gets all the credit. And they knew at the time that this would happen, but they did it.
It is the truth that excites you. So what is the value of science fiction? For which you are justifiably universally known?
Okay, let's look at literature as a whole. Fiction. Just any kind of fiction. I think that serious fiction, fiction where the writer feels he's accomplishing something besides simply amusing people, but there's nothing wrong with simply amusing people. But if he thinks that he's doing something besides simply amusing people, what he's doing is holding up a mirror to the human species, making it possible for you to understand people better because you've read the novel or the story, maybe making it possible for you to understand yourself better. This is an important thing. Now, science fiction uses a different method for doing this. It works up an artificial society, one which doesn't exist, one which may possibly exist in the future, but not necessarily. And it portrays events against the background of this society. Well, it's amusing, it's interesting, but in the hope that this will give a new way of looking at people, at looking at yourself, that you will see yourself seen against this strange society in ways you couldn't possibly see yourself seen against the present society. I don't claim that I succeed at this. It seems to me that to do this properly takes a great man, you know, takes a guy on the level of well, at least half of Shakespeare. And I don't come up there, but I try. And who knows, maybe once in a while I succeed a little bit, but I try. And that's why I write science fiction, because it's a way of writing fiction in a different style and enables me to make points I can't make otherwise.
Someone said that one great advantage of science fiction is to introduce the reader to the idea of change, of changes that may well be inevitable, but which are not conceivable to the reader?
Well, I've said that myself on different times. The fact is that society is always changing, but the rate of change has been accelerating all through history for a variety of reasons. For one thing, change is cumulative. The very changes you make it easier to make further changes. It was only with the coming of the Industrial Revolution that the rate of change became fast enough to be visible in a single lifetime, so that people were suddenly aware that not only were things changing, but they would continue to change after they died. And that was when science fiction came into being, as opposed to fantasy and adventure tales. Because people knew that they would die before they could see the changes that would happen in the next century, so it would be nice to imagine what they might be. And other people decided to make money that way. Well, as time goes on and the rate of change still continues to accelerate, it becomes more and more important to adjust what you do today with the fact of change in the future. It's ridiculous to make your plans now on the assumption that things will continue as they are now. You have to assume that if something you're doing is going to reach fruition in 10 years, that in those 10 years, changes may take place, and perhaps what you're doing will have no meaning then. So that nowadays, futurism has become an important part of thinking in business, in economics, in politics, in military affairs. At any rate, science fiction is important because it fights the natural notion that people would have that somehow there's something about things the way they are right now which are permanent.
Use your imagination, which you do so often, in this way. If the next president asked you to draft his inaugural address and said, Dr. Asimov, make sure I say the one thing you think I must convince the American people that they should pay attention to, what would it be?
Well, it would be this, that all the problems that we face now that are really important, that are life and death, are global problems, that they affect all of us alike. The ozone layer, if it disappears for all of us. Pollution in the ocean, in the atmosphere, in the groundwater is for all of us. The only way we can ameliorate these problems, solve them, prevent them from destroying us, is again a global solution. We can't expect that anything the United States alone does is going to affect the situation the world over. There's got to be cooperation among the nations of the world. International cooperation is absolutely essential. And if we can achieve that in the face of a danger deadlier than has ever faced humanity before, why, one of the advantages we'll have is that automatically we will probably start spending less money on war and preparations for war, which will in turn be a beneficial cycle because we'll have more money for solving these problems we must solve.
What about, though, the one subject you've written so much about, the population explosion? You know, the fact that right now the population of the globe is over 4 billion. You've said that if
it's over 5 billion.
Over 5 billion, yes. You've said if it continues at its 2% growth rate a year, it'll be what in another?
Well, actually, it's down to 1.6%, but with a higher population, it's the same amount in actual numbers, 80 million a year. So that, by the year 2000, it's going to be perhaps 6.5 billion.
That's just 12 years from now.
Yes, it's going up very fast.
How many people do you think the Earth is able to sustain?
I don't think it's able to sustain the 5 billion in the long run. So that, right now, most of the world is living under appalling conditions. And we can't possibly improve the conditions of everyone. We can't raise the entire world to the average standard of living in the United States because I don't think we have the resources and the ability to distribute well enough for that. We have condemned, right now as it is, most of the world to a miserable starvation level of existence. And it'll just get worse as the population continues to go up.
But you can't just say to a woman, don't have children.
Well, you know, it's not so much that. It's so many people are saying have children. There is such a pro-natalist attitude in the world. We celebrate Mother's Day so enthusiastically. We say, may all your troubles be little ones. We celebrate additional children. I feel sometimes that if we'd only stop pushing for children, that somehow there would be fewer of them.
Why did you say that the price of survival is the equality of women?
Because if women have full ability to enter into all facets of the human condition, if they can enter business, if they can enter religion, science, government on an equal basis with men, they will be so busy that they won't feel as necessary to have a great many children. As long as you have women under conditions where they don't feel any sense of value, no self-worth, except as mothers, except as baby factories, they'll have a lot of children, because that's the only way they can prove they're worth something. In general, if you look through the world, the lower the status of women, the higher the birth rate. And the higher the birth rate, the lower the status of women. So that if you could somehow raise the status of women, I am certain the birth rate will fall drastically through the choice of the women themselves.
What do you see happening to the idea of dignity, to the human species, if this population growth continues at its present rate?
It's going to destroy it all. I use the what I call my bathroom metaphor. If two people live in an apartment and there are two bathrooms, then both have what I might call freedom of the bathroom. Go to the bathroom anytime you want to and stay as long as you want to for whatever you need. And this, to my way, is ideal. And everyone believes in the freedom of the bathroom. It should be right there in the Constitution. But if you have 20 people in an apartment and two bathrooms, no matter how much every person believes in freedom of the bathroom, there is no such thing. You have to set up times for each person. You have to bang at the door, aren't you through yet, and so on. And in the same way, democracy cannot survive overpopulation. Human dignity cannot survive it. Convenience and decency cannot survive it. As you put more and more people onto the world, the value of life not only declines, but it disappears. It doesn't matter if someone dies.
Of course, so many people say, well, the United States is bringing its population under control, that we're going to have a stable population. We're not even reproducing ourselves, and what the rest of the world does, we can't control.
The population in the United States is still going up. The only time it went up really slowly was during the Great Depression, when there were no laws sort of lowering the birth rate. There was just an economic depression which made people think twice before they had children. But the United States is doing something else, which is absolutely refusing to help other nations control population. So that our feeling is somehow that it's enough for us to somehow make sure that the United States is in good shape, and what other nations do is their business. It's not their business, it's our business too.
In other words, we can't exist as a stable economy and a stable society if around us is turmoil, chaos?
Absolutely not. Right now, in many nations, they're just destroying the rainforests because they need the firewood, they need the space for farms.
Why should I care about that?
Because without the rainforests, we're going to have deserts instead. The food supply will dwindle. As a matter of fact, there's even the possibility that we're going to lose all kinds of valuable substances we know nothing about. Those rainforests have an incredible number of species of plants and animals that we know very little about. Some of them may produce chemicals of great importance pharmacologically and medically. Some of the plants might, if properly cultivated, be new food sources. And in addition to that, nothing produces the oxygen of the atmosphere with the same intensity that a forest does. Anything that substitutes for it will be producing less oxygen. We're going to be destroying our atmosphere too.
You're how old now?
68.
You've lived through a lot of this century. Have you ever seen human beings think with the perspective you're calling on them to think now?
Well, it's perhaps not important that every human being thinks so. How about the leaders thinking so? How about the opinion makers thinking so? Ordinary people might follow them if we didn't have leaders who were thinking in exactly the opposite way. If we didn't have people who were shouting hatred and suspicion of foreigners, if we didn't have people who were shouting that it's more important to be unfriendly than to be friendly, if we didn't have people shouting somehow that the people inside the country who don't look exactly the way the rest of us look, or something's wrong with them. Again, it's almost not necessary for us to do good. It's only necessary for us to stop doing evil, for goodness sakes.
From the Great Hall at Cooper Union in New York City, this has been a conversation with Isaac Asimov. I'm Bill Moyers.
This program was made possible by a grant from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. For a transcript of this program, send $3 to A World of Ideas, Journal Graphics, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007. Video cassette information is also available at this address.
I'm Bill Moyers. As a new generation of women enters the workforce, will they be able to change the business world, or will the business world change them? Join me with Catherine Bateson next time on A World of Ideas. Good evening, I'm Bill Moyers. Not too many years ago, it all would have seemed like science fiction. A rocket weighing over 2,000 tons blasts 184 miles into space and completes a full orbit of the Earth in 90 minutes. On the same day, 12 countries signed an agreement to build an orbiting space station. Of course, it's all real. It all just happened. But as my guest tonight warns, if we're going to keep turning science fiction into science fact, we may have to rethink what we mean by education. And he should know. Join me for part 2 of a conversation with Isaac Asimov.
This program is made possible by a grant from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. A World of Ideas with Bill Moyers.
Isaac Asimov. Just about everyone who reads has read something of his. Science fiction, of course. His Foundation series is a classic. Science fact, chemistry, astronomy, physics, biology, children's books, history, math. One scientist calls Asimov the greatest explainer of the age. In this second part of our conversation in the Great Hall of Cooper Union in New York City, where Americans have been debating ideas since the days of Abraham Lincoln, I talked to Dr. Asimov about science, education, and the universe. Your book, your latest book, your 300 and what?
Well, 391 altogether.
391, as far as the human eye could see. How far can we see?
It depends on what we're looking for. If we're looking at human history, we can't see very far because human history is a chaotic thing. Small changes have big results, unpredictable in direction. But if we're looking at something that is essentially simple, such as stars and galaxies and things like that, then it is possible to look far, far ahead. We may be wrong, but it is possible to make a case for something that might happen 10 to the 100 years in the future, one with 100 zeros after it. In fact, that's what I do in the last essay. That's why I call it Far as Human Eye Could See. It comes from Locksley Hall by Tennyson, of course. Then I looked into the future far as human eye could see, saw the something of the other and the wonders yet to be, and so on. But you have to stick to very simple things.
You see wonders out there?
Yes, in a way. I see a picture of a universe which somehow becomes infinite. It can expand and expand and expand until it is sufficiently thinly spaced to allow another universe to begin, and that perhaps surrounding our universe is the far, faint remnant of another universe, and beyond that of another one even fainter, and so on infinitely. And if the universe doesn't expand forever, if it goes into a crunch and disappears, there may be a really limitless ocean of vacuum out of which new universes are constantly arising like bubbles in boiling water, some large, some small, some with one set of laws, some with another. We just happen to be living in one that's suitable for life. And in fact, there we get into the anthropic principle, because we can only exist in one that's suitable for life, then the mere fact that we exist makes it suitable for life, you see. And there are people who argue that everything in the universe depends upon human observation. And then there are people who say, well, supposing there are no human beings, just frogs. Will a frog observation do the trick? It's a game for modern scholastics. Instead of how many angels can dance on the point of a pin, we try to argue out quantum weirdness. It's a lot of fun, but it makes you dizzy.
Do you think that we can educate ourselves, that any one of us, as you once said, at any time can be educated in any subject that strikes our fancy?
Well, the key words there are that strikes our fancy. There are some things that simply don't strike my fancy, and I doubt that I can force myself to be educated in it. I have never really been interested in economics, for instance, or in psychology, or in art as a non-spectator, to really know
Right.
what art is all about. And therefore, even if I try to read about it, it bounces off. On the other hand, when there's a subject I'm ferociously interested in, then it is easy for me to learn about it. I read it, I absorb it, I take it in gladly and cheerfully. I've written more books on astronomy than on any other science, and no one has ever complained that my astronomical books are wrong, silly, anything like that. I've never taken a course in astronomy. I'm completely self-trained in it. On the other hand, I've written relatively few books on chemistry, which is my training. I've got a PhD in chemistry. But I know too much chemistry to get excited over it, whereas astronomy is different.
Excited. Learning really excites you, doesn't it?
Oh yes, I think it's the actual process of broadening yourself, of knowing there's now a little extra facet of the universe you know about and can think about and can understand. It seems to me that when it's time to die, and that will come to all of us, there'd be a certain pleasure in thinking that you had utilized your life well, that you had learned as much as you could, gathered in as much as possible of the universe, and enjoyed it. I mean, there's only this one universe and only this one lifetime to try to grasp it. And while it is inconceivable that anyone can grasp more than a tiny portion of it, at least do that much. I mean, what a tragedy just to pass through and get nothing out of it.
Well, what happens to me when I learn something new, and it happens every day, is that I just feel a little more at home in this universe, a little more comfortable in the nest. I'm afraid that just about the time I'll begin to be really at home, it'll be over.
Well, you know, I used to worry about that. I said I'm gradually managing to cram my mind more and more full of things. I've got this beautiful mind, and it's going to die, and it'll all be gone. And then I say, not in my case. Every idea I've ever had, I've written down, and it's all there on paper. And I won't be gone. It'll be there.
Do you realize how the possibility of that depressing the rest of us who can't write it down the way you can? Isn't it possible that one could say, well, since I can't write the way Isaac Asimov and know what Isaac Asimov knows, I won't do it at all?
Oh, I wouldn't want people to do that. A little is better than nothing. In fact, you might say that I overdo it. Lately, I've been thinking that people must look upon me as some kind of a freak. There was a certain pleasure in writing 100 books. You know, I felt I've accomplished something, then 200. But now it stands at 391. It's liable to be 400 by the end of the year. And I have every intention of continuing because I enjoy the process. And in the end, it seems to me nobody will care what I write, just the number. And maybe I will have defeated myself in that way.
How do you explain yourself to yourself? What is it that caused a man to want to know so much that he would write 400 books?
Well, I suppose it's sheer hedonism. I just enjoy it so.
Pleasure.
Yes. I mean, what made Bing Crosby or Bob Hope play all that golf? You know, they enjoyed it. And that's the way it is with me.
Do you think it's possible that this contagion can be spread to ordinary folks out there, this passion for learning that you have? Can we have a revolution in learning?
Yes, I think not only we can, but I think we're going to have to. As computers take over more and more of the work that human beings shouldn't be doing in the first place because it doesn't utilize their brain, it stultifies and bores them to death, there's going to be nothing left for human beings to do but the more creative types of endeavor. And the only way we can indulge in the more creative types of endeavor is to have brains that aim at that from the start. You can't take a human being and put him to work at a job that underuses the brain and keep him working at it for decades and decades and then say, well, that job isn't there, go do something more creative. You have beaten the creativity out of him. But if from the start children are educated into appreciating their own creativity, then probably we can, almost all of us, be creative. Just as in the old days, very few people could read and write. Literacy was a very novel sort of thing, and you felt that most people just didn't have it in them. But when you indulged in mass education, it turned out that most people could be taught to read and write. In the same way, if instead of having mass education, as we now have, must have, with a curriculum, once we have outlets, computer outlets in every home, each of them hooked up to enormous libraries where anyone can ask any question and be given answers, be given reference material, be something you're interested in knowing. From an early age, however silly it might seem to someone else, that's what you're interested in. And you ask, and you can find out, and you can follow it up. And you can do it in your own home, at your own speed, in your own direction, in your own time. Then everyone will enjoy learning. Nowadays, what people call learning is forced on you, and everyone is forced to learn the same thing on the same day at the same speed in class. And everyone is different. For some it goes too fast, for some too slow, for some in the wrong direction. But give them a chance, in addition to school, I don't say we abolish school, but in addition to school, to follow up their own bent from the start.
Well, I love the vision, but what about the argument that machines, computers, dehumanize learning?
Well, as a matter of fact, it's just the reverse. It seems to me that it's through this machine that for the first time we'll be able to have a one-to-one relationship between information source and information consumer, so to speak. Well, in the old days, you used to have tutors for children. A person who could afford it would hire a pedagogue, a tutor, and he would teach the children, and if he knew his job, he could adapt his teaching to the tastes and abilities of the students, you see. But how many people could afford to hire a pedagogue? Most children went uneducated. Then we reached the point where it's absolutely necessary to educate everybody. But the only way we could do it is to have one teacher for a great many of students, and in order to organize the situation properly, we gave them a curriculum to teach from. So how many teachers are good at this too? Like in everything else, the number of teachers is far greater than the number of good teachers. So we either have a one-to-one relationship for the very few or a one-to-many relationship for the many. Now there's a possibility of a one-to-one relationship for the many. Everyone can have a teacher in the form of access to the gathered knowledge of the human species.
Through the libraries that are connected to the computer.
That's right.
On my desk in my home.
Right.
I can sit there and call up, well, what if I want to learn only about baseball?
Well, that's all right. You learn all you want about baseball, because the more you learn about baseball, the more you might grow interested in mathematics to try to figure out what they mean by those earned run averages and the batting averages and so on. You might in the end become more interested in math than baseball if you follow your own bent and you're not told. On the other hand, someone who is interested in mathematics may suddenly find himself very enticed by the problem of how you throw a curved ball. And he may find himself engaged in sports physics, so to speak. Well, why not? Why not?
But you know, Dr. Asimov, we have such a spotty, in fact, we have such a miserable record in this country of providing, say, poor children, even with good classrooms. And I wonder if our society can ever harness itself to provide everyone, including poor children, with good computers.
Perhaps not at the very start, you know, but it's like asking yourself, is it possible to supply everybody in a nation with clean water? Now, there are many nations where it is impossible to get clean water except under very unusual circumstances. That was one reason why people started drinking beer and wine, because the alcohol killed the germs. If you didn't drink that, you died of cholera. But there are places where you can supply clean water for nearly everyone. Now, the United States probably supplies clean water for a larger percentage of its population than almost any other nation can. It's not that we would expect everybody to have a perfect computer right off, to have equal access to outlets, but you try for it. And with time, I think more and more will. Just as, for goodness sakes, when I was young, very few people had automobiles, very few people had telephones in the home. Almost nobody had an air conditioner. Now, these things are very common indeed, almost universal. It might be the same way.
So you're, in a sense, every student has his or her own private school.
Yes, and it belongs to him or her. He can be the sole dictator of what he is going to learn, of what he is going to study. Mind you, this is not all he's going to do. He'll still be going to school for some things that he has to know.
Common knowledge, common database.
Right, and interaction with other students and with teachers. You can't get away from that. But he's got to look forward to the fun in life, which is following his own bent.
This revolution you're talking about, personal learning, it's not just for the young, is it?
No, that's a good point. No, it's not just for the young. That's another trouble with education as we now have it. It is for the young, and people think of education as something that they can finish. And what's more, when they finish, that's a rite of passage into manhood.
Real world.
Right.
I've
finished with school. I'm no more a child. And therefore, anything that reminds you of school, reading books, having ideas, asking questions, that's kid stuff. Now you're an adult, you don't do that sort of thing anymore, you see?
And in fact, like prison, the reward of school is getting out.
Exactly.
Kids begin to say, when you're getting out.
And every kid knows that. Every kid knows the only reason he's in school is because he's a kid and little and weak. And as soon as and in fact, if he manages to get out early, if he drops out, why, he's just a premature man.
Yeah. So that's exactly right. In the city, I've talked to some of these dropouts, and they think they're there. They think they've become men because they're out of school.
That's right.
What's wrong with this?
Well, what's wrong with it is you'll have everybody looking forward to no longer learning, and you make them ashamed afterwards of going back to learning. If you have something like this, then anyone, any age, can learn by himself, can continue to be interested. There's no reason then, if you enjoy learning, why you should stop at a given age. People don't stop things they enjoy doing just because they reach a certain age. They don't stop playing tennis just because they turn 40. They don't stop with sex just because they turn 40. They keep it up as long as they can if they enjoy it. And learning will be the same thing. The trouble with learning is most people don't enjoy it because of the circumstances. Make it possible for them to enjoy learning, and they'll keep it up. There's the famous story about Oliver Wendell Holmes, who lived to be well into his 90s. He was in the hospital one time. He had not long to live. He was over 90 already. And President Roosevelt came to see him. And there was Oliver Wendell Holmes reading a Greek grammar. And Roosevelt said, "Why are you reading a Greek grammar, Mr. Holmes?" And Mr. Holmes said, "To improve my mind, Mr. President." I mean, that he hadn't stopped.
Are we romanticizing this, or do you really think that Saul Bellows' character Herzog was correct when he said, the people who come to evening classes are only ostensibly after culture? What they're really seeking is clarity, good sense, and truth, even an atom of it. People, he said, are dying. It is no metaphor for the lack of something real at the end of the day.
Well, I'd like to think that was so. I'd like to think that people who are given a chance at learning facts, at broadening their knowledge of the universe, wouldn't seek so avidly after mysticism. I wonder how many people go for these mystical, nonsensical things simply because they must go for something, and this is the only thing available.
Mysticism. What bothers you about mysticism?
Well, the same thing bothers me about mysticism that would bother me about con men. I mean, it doesn't seem to me to be right to sell a person phony stock and take money for it. And this is what mystics are doing. They're selling people phony knowledge and taking money for it. And even if people feel good about it, I can well imagine that a person who really believes in astrology is going to have a feeling of security because he knows that this is a bad day, so he'll stay at home. But nevertheless, a guy who's got phony stock may look at it and it's nice and shiny and scrolls and all gold lettering and stuff. And as long as he doesn't have to do anything with it, he feels real rich looking at it. But that's no excuse. He still has phony stock. And the person who buys mysticism still has phony knowledge. And it bothers me.
What's the real knowledge?
Well, we can't be absolutely certain. Science doesn't purvey absolute truth. Science is a mechanism. It's a way of trying to improve your knowledge of nature. It's a system for testing your thoughts against the universe and seeing whether they match. And this works not just for the ordinary aspects of science, but for all of life. I should think people would want to know that what they know is truly what the universe is like, or at least as close as they can get to it.
You wrote a few years ago that the decline in America's world power is in part brought about by our diminishing status as a world science leader. Do you still think that's so?
Yes, I do. We're still probably well up there technologically, you know, but what margins we do have are slimmer, narrower, and we're being overtaken.
Why? Why have we neglected science?
Well, partly because of over-success. I mean, if you're so convinced that, I suppose the most damaging statement that the United States has ever been subjected to is the phrase, Yankee know-how. You get the feeling somehow that Americans, just by the fact that they're Americans, are somehow smarter and more ingenious than other people, which really is not so. It causes you to rest on your laurels. And actually, it was first used in connection with the atomic bomb that I know of. The atomic bomb was invented and brought to fruition by a bunch of European refugees. You can go down the list of names. That's the Yankee know-how. But also, there's this feeling that somehow, because we have what we consider a decent economic system, freedom, free enterprise, all that, which I'm all in favor of, that alone will do it for us. And I admit that helps out in some ways, but not if we're lazy about it. It's not going to do it for us if we don't do anything, you see.
And yet there's always been a bias in this society against science.
Well, it's against intellectuality. I mean, when nominee Bush can castigate Dukakis for going to Harvard, whereas he went to a proletarian school like Yale, you know there's something wrong. I mean, there you're actually trying to run a person down for belonging to what people see as an elite school, that there's something vicious about going to an elite school.
What did you mean when you said once that we have to stop living by the code of the past?
Only because times change. In the old days, we didn't worry about the future, and now we must. We have to worry about the future all the time. Things are changing so fast.
You and I may not be around when it arrives.
Well, I imagine our children will be, our grandchildren, and besides, the human race will be. And, well, let me try to make it, I don't want to sound like a foolish idealist. I don't want to make it sound as though I just love humanity. But look, my books are going to survive me. I want to have people alive to read them.
Right. Is it possible that you suffer from an excessive trust in rationality?
Well, I can't answer that very easily. Perhaps I do, you know. But I can't think of anything else to trust in. You say to yourself, if you can't go by reason, what can you go by? Now, one answer is faith. But faith in what? I notice there's no general agreement in the world on matters of faith. They are not compelling. I have my faith, you have my faith, and there's no way in which I can translate my faith to you or vice versa. At least as far as reason is concerned, there's a system of transfer, a system of rational argument, following the laws of logic, etc., that a great many people agree on. So that in reason, there are what we call compelling arguments. That is, if I locate certain kinds of evidence, and even people who disagreed with me to begin with, once they study the evidence, find themselves compelled to agree by the evidence. But wherever we go beyond reason into faith, there's no such thing as compelling evidence. Even if you have a revelation, how can you transfer that revelation to others? By what system?
So it's in the mind you find your hope.
Yes, and I have to say I can't wait until everyone in the world is rational, just until enough are rational to make a difference.
From the Great Hall of Cooper Union in New York City, this has been a conversation with Isaac Asimov. I'm Bill Moyers.
This program was made possible by a grant from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. For a transcript of this program, send $3 to A World of Ideas, Journal Graphics, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007. Video cassette information is also available at this address.
I'm Bill Moyers. It may be a cliche, but we use it all the time. I learned it at my mother's knee. Join me with the noted child psychologist Barry Brazelton as we discuss what babies learn from their parents and vice versa. Next time on A World of Ideas.